The silence breakers, who started the hashtag #MeToo movement, have been named by Time magazine as Person of the Year. Today on Roundtable Perspective, Dr. Theresa Carilli joins me in examining the sexual harassment cases that have been in the news media and also discussing what implications that has in politics and in all of our lives. Welcome to the Roundtable Perspective. I'm your host, Tom Roach. I'm joined by my guest today, Dr. Theresa Carilli. We're going to discuss sexual harassment in the workplace. Dr. Carilli has a career that's looked into the media side of this a little bit. Her 4 books that she's co-edited include Queer Media Images, Challenging Images of Women in the Media, Women and the Media, Diverse Perspectives, and also Cultural Diversity in the U.S. Media. So today we have a situation where sexual harassment is getting a lot of attention. We've got candidates who are being accused and considering withdrawing from races, and media moguls who have been displaced. How did we get here, Theresa? Help us put this in perspective.
Well, I want to just go back to what has happened in the last year, which was that Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. And prior to being elected President of the United States, there were multiple women accusing him of sexual harassment. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to be, I think women maybe felt as a in general, that issue was being ignored. And
because it came out of the campaign, of course,
right,
with the Bush tape, right?
Right, and then what happens is that the day after he was inaugurated, there was that he was sworn in. There was a protest across the world of women coming out protesting his presidency because they saw this as a real backlash to women and women's rights. And so I think that's really where it begins, is that, and I think that it has just, there has been, I think, a general anger. And don't forget, we have to look at the context of this. This was a female, he went up against a female candidate.
Right.
And some people believe, I maybe want to include myself in this as well, that this is just an example of we do not want a female president in this country. We do not want a woman running this country. So there's a lot of anger being channeled here right now. And so now it just seems like this issue of sexual harassment, I think that more women are willing to come forward and to talk about this issue.
Well, certainly there's some catalyst here, because most of these accusations are things that about things that happened years ago in a lot of cases. So the October 5th, the Harvey Weinstein issue crops up, and and then we move from that to Roy Price to Charlie Rose. It just it just keeps evolving.
One thing
here.
after the next, and it's really a complicated issue that's going on right now. But I just want to go back and acknowledge 2 things.
Sure.
One is that in this country in the 70s and 80s, we weren't having these discussions at all. It was a perfectly normal, shall I put that in, sexual harassment just seemed like part of the workplace. That was fine. So we have to look at this historically. I mean, I think that it's always been there to some degree, but we just haven't been talking about it, and it's an important issue. And now let's go back to Harvey Weinstein. So somehow there seems to be a group of women that I know that are coming forward and charging him, and we know. I mean, I think one of the things about about women is that they talk to each other, and they, I think this is a hard thing for me to acknowledge, but
Right.
I think in a workplace, women are still second-class citizens, and what they do is that they just kind of defer to men. And I have a great story. Can I
Sure.
tell you my story?
Yes.
When I worked in television, I worked for...
Let me introduce this for a second, because Dr. Carilli is a full professor at Purdue University, but she also worked in television. Before you had your Ph.D., or?
This was actually before I had
Yes.
my Ph.D.
And you were with the CBS affiliate in San
yes,
Francisco.
Yes.
And you were
Yeah.
doing research for them, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, and I had actually, I was doing a lot of, I did, a lot of number crunching in those days.
Yeah.
But I worked with this executive producer, and I'm not at liberty, I think, to say her name.
Please
but
don't.
She actually
Okay.
is a very, very famous executive producer.
Okay.
And I worked with her, and I learned a lot from her. And one of the things I learned is that she would come to me and say, listen, I want you to work on these numbers, and this is what I think they're really saying. And I'd say, well, I don't know that I agree with you. But she'd say, no, you have to listen to me, right? And then we'd go in front of the general manager of the TV station, and she'd start giggling. And the way she got her, I would say her way, or the way she got him to listen to her, she'd just giggle and make jokes with him, and then he would listen to her.
Wow.
And that was one of the biggest lessons for me in my life, that, wow, is this what women have to do to succeed? And I find it really, really troubling. But we're still, we're still seeing, I think, a lot of that. And so this is, like I say, I think this is this kind of, how do I say this? This consciousness of some anger and rage that and Harvey Weinstein, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And I think many of us know that this is something that happens more than many of us want to acknowledge, in fact, and I think that it's just finally, I think, women saying we have a voice, we want to talk about this.
There's a particular focus to the sexual harassment issues that we're looking at right now, and they're dealing with men who are sort of career gatekeepers.
Yeah, that's
Right.
an interesting thing to say.
And so what a lot of these have in common, I don't know about, maybe not all of them, but most of them, particularly the ones in the media, though, is there's this sense that you've got to trade something off here if you want to get ahead in this business, right?
Yes.
Maybe another way to look at this is, are we, through television right now and some of these stories, are we acting out a morality play here for the rest of the culture, or is this really just about the fields that it's located in right now?
Boy, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I think that I want to just go back to say that there is just this feeling of women are frustrated with not being heard.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the main thing. And I want to, if I may, I want
Sure.
to express a couple of concerns, because
Yeah.
what happens now is that our focus on sexual harassment then takes the focus off of are women being treated equally in the workplace? Are they having the opportunities in the workplace? And that's kind of something that I think needs to be. I think the sexual harassment is a big piece of this, but if we stay with that, what we're doing is we're still focusing on women as objects.
So, is there a downside to this because women are being portrayed as victims? Is it somehow
I think so,
disempowering?
yes. I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the backlash that is going to come out of this. Maybe even some legislation that may come out of this that may really say to women, you can't do this. You can't do this to us. And that is, I think, probably what a lot of women are concerned about. But yeah, I do worry. I am really concerned that I think we need to start moving the dialogue towards, are we getting treated equally? Do we have as much of a voice? Do we matter? Are we part of the decisions that are being made? And I think that's, you can almost look at any company, any corporation, and you see for the most part that while there might be one token female, they're mostly run by men. And that's a frustration, for women, I believe, the opportunities.
Just to take a slight shift here, there are different types of issues that have been raised here. And if we go back and throw the Bill Cosby narrative into this, right? And then Elle Franken, who posed for some highly inappropriate photographs and maybe some other things. There's more things coming out. Is it important that we distinguish between that we're discerning about the types of crimes that we're talking about here?
Yes, I do
you
think so. Yes, I do. And I just, it's so tough because, it's in some ways I think that there needs to be a zero tolerance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that we can look at certain individuals like Harvey Weinstein and realize that what he was doing was pretty egregious,
Yeah.
And we'd all agree with that. I think some of what's going on, you could say, okay, but the important thing is that women have been, I need to say this because this is really, to me, a critical issue.
Yeah.
Women are always doubted, and women are always, why would a woman accuse a man of this? And it's just that, there has to be some kind of understanding that men need to have. Yeah. That this does happen, and even though they may not be aware of it, it does happen.
Yeah.
And then there's an issue of women not feeling safe about coming forward because they don't want to lose their job, and that's a critical issue as well.
Right. There's another element to this too, in that it's not that it's just about sexual issues. There's something disempowering about it.
Yeah.
If a coworker, even if it's not a supervisor, I think, authors an unwanted advance towards a woman, isn't it sort of disempowering in a sense because it's relegating the other person to a sort of a subordinate role?
Well, put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah.
If somebody, if for years you thought you had succeeded because of your intelligence and your know-how and your good decision making, and suddenly you find yourself, in that kind of a situation, how would that feel to you? Pretty bad.
Yeah.
And am I allowed to ask you questions? And
Please go ahead.
I
Yeah,
really
go
want
right
to know
ahead.
what you think of all of
Yeah.
this.
Well, I think it's about time we address this publicly, and I do think we are acting out a kind of morality play here for everyone.
And what do you mean by that? I really want to know what that means for you.
You're symbolically dramatizing something because it has some educational value beyond just being entertaining.
Yeah.
So I'm sure some people are following these stories here because they like to see the fall of the great man or whatever, right? And it's amusing for that. But I think it's also making all of us more conscious of how these things appear, and maybe making people more careful, and then also maybe making those people who have the authority to correct these problems, making them more motivated to start dealing with them. And you brought up the case with the Supreme Court candidate and Anita Hill.
Anita Hill, yeah.
The disappointing thing about that was that it didn't matter. She brought it up, and she was vilified, and he's sitting on the Supreme Court.
But I'm going to tell.
But I think that's less likely to happen now because of this. I think we've broadened our public consciousness of the issue.
Well, but okay, the point that you're making is that it's in the public discourse now, and that's really, really important. But but still, then, if that were the case, why is Donald Trump our president?
Well,
and still we can't. So
a lot of us are asking ourselves that.
Yeah, but this is just it is that if it's out there and it matters, then why did this happen? Why was it bypassed and overlooked and not seen as important? And I want to just tell you something about Anita Hill because I want you to know that at the time, Anita Hill was a professor at the University a law professor at the University of Oklahoma, and at the time, I got together a whole group of students and had them sign a petition, and we sent it to Anita Hill and told her how much we approved because I thought it was important for the students to understand that they had a voice, and even if it fell on, it no longer really, had any teeth, so to speak.
Yeah.
We really, we did something about that. We did. We had an activist moment here.
Have you followed her career at all since then?
No, I know they did like a made-for-TV movie about her and all that, and that was but I think she's done really well. But I'm sure that's she did. That is really that's a key moment. But I think one of the things you said, and I kind of want to challenge you about this, is that There is, I think this is really tough because I think men see this, and I don't want to generalize, but I think it's really important not to see this as a male-female issue and to see it as an issue of people, of us, of people being affected and how you treat people, not about, you know what I mean? That's a really important issue here because I think that there's always been this kind of, when a woman identifies as a feminist, there's always this underlying message that, they just, really hate men and they're, and I'm really sorry that message is out there because it's nothing like that. Feminism is about equality at its very root. It's about equality for people with less privilege and who are marginalized and don't have a voice.
Right. Well, and that's true. And I had a former student who came to me, a male student who was being harassed, and wanted to know if I thought he should quit or if he should raise the issue. And and we talked about, how are they going to take this? Will you get fired? I think we're at that point, 2017, where it's evolved enough that I think it's hard to just see it as a male-female issue.
Yeah.
But I think it mostly is, and you made the point that most of these career paths are dominated and have gatekeepers that are men, essentially, and so because of that, it does break down. At least on a political level, as kind of a male-female issue. Well,
men have power and control over most institutions in this country, and I think that's where if we see more women, come into power, I think we might see some changes made and maybe some more open discussion about this.
Well, so if you had a former student who had a job doing focus groups for a television station, okay? And she came to you and said, I'm on this really great career path here and things are going well, but my supervisor makes sexual comments about me whenever I come into a meeting, and I'm being treated, kind of like an object here. How do you begin to advise somebody on something like that?
Well, my own personal view on this is that you talk to you talk to the people involved, and you talk to your superior in this case, and hopefully ignite a discussion about this and ignite a discussion in and the next step is to go to your EEOC or your Human Resources and talk to somebody about this if you don't feel like you're getting anywhere.
Well, so what if you assess this in advance and you really don't think you're going to get anywhere? Do you protest for the sake of the issue and put your career at stake, or are there times when you would tell someone, if it's not overly offensive, I don't know if we can gauge it that way, deal with it? Or is it something that we just need to blow the whistle on?
Well, I think we have to think about the lives involved because it's not like you have to think about, I think, everybody involved. The person who is being accused of sexual harassment, the person who is accusing the sexual, and it's just a very complicated, I wish there was an easy solution for it, but, and of course perception plays a big role in this, and that's a very, very, critical issue as well. It's tough. Those are tough questions.
Well, where do you think it's going? Do you think we'll be better off because of this 5 years from now, or do you think we'll just cycle back to where we were?
My hope is that we're going to start seeing more and more women wanting to voice their concerns about other issues as well as sexual harassment, about ways that they don't feel that they are being treated fairly, and that's my hope, is that this will be a bigger conversation.
Sure.
I'm not really sure where it's going to go. It's a very interesting question.
Well, apparently the Me Too hashtag opportunity played a big part in this, so it may be one of those elements of the culture that's just going to change now because there's this new channel out there for people to express themselves.
I believe that, I want to go back to this, I believe that the statistics are, and I could be wrong about this, it's about 1 in 3 or 4 women that have been, had some kind of sexual assault or harassment in their life. And it's very interesting because we have to look at this issue generationally. Now, I can look at my generation and say we we all kept quiet, you know,
Yeah.
and we learned that we had to if we were going to do
Right,
anything or
right,
accomplish anything.
right.
But nowadays, you're having more women coming forward and feeling open enough. And it's a forum and a voice. And I hope that they look at whoever, you know, is going with that hashtag, that they look at this and say, you know, we have to move this dialogue ahead.
Yeah. Well, and to some extent, it seems like it's a generational shift too, because I
Yeah.
think we were part of a generation that decided we were going to be concerned about civil rights and, you know, whether or not
Right.
the war was just, and
Isn't that an
you know,
interesting point?
you
Yeah.
know, women's issues. You know, I remember, you know, if women friends in, you know, the early '70s working in restaurants and, you know, saying, you know, you can't just tip people 50 cents. You know, they're making a living there, and
Yeah.
they're kind of forcing us to think about
Right.
what they were dealing with, and you know, we don't want to be called chicks anymore. You know, and you know, there were all these little steps, these baby steps that we took
Yeah.
as we were coming along, and it just seems to me that as a result of us generationally talking about this more, the music, right? Some of the music, some of it seems ridiculous now. I Am Woman, and you know, all of these things that were part of our growing up and our maturing. They're lodged in with us, and I think they moved us along. And to some extent, we've, you know, as we were trying to get jobs when we were in our 20s and our 30s and our 40s, we were being hired by gatekeepers from that other generation, and male and female. I think we kept our mouths shut, and part of it just seems to me, part of what may be happening right now. Is that we're now, you know, we've reached critical mass,
Yeah.
and so, you know, the way we look at the world is becoming a little bit more dominant than it was prior to this.
Well, you know, this is an interesting thing to think about our generation, because what our generation had was what's called second wave, and now we're on to third wave
Right.
feminism, and even beyond that.
Social Security feminism, maybe, right?
But the thing I want to say here is that what's happened is that a lot of young women today don't understand. Like when I did my master's degree, I was the only female in the program.
Really?
And I had to be the best, and I was the best. I was the best. I had to be. I was told, because the guys would just they'd give me a hard time.
Really?
They'd just say, "Oh, what is he?" I mean, so I really, but I really want to say that younger women today really don't know how bad it was. Like in the '70s, you couldn't get a credit card as a woman.
Yeah.
You only had to get your husband's. You could only get your husband's credit card. You couldn't get a place to live. You couldn't get. I mean, you had very few rights. You had you know.
My mom couldn't buy a house. They, you know, because she couldn't get one of my uncles to co-sign for her.
Yeah. See, a great example. And I think the younger generations growing up today don't realize. And don't know this history, and this history is very, very important, because it will really affect. I mean, you know, these students. I like to think that a lot of the female students are here today because I went into that master's program.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah.
And you know, and
because of all of the Teresas that went into all of those master's programs.
Yes,
That's
and
right.
this was really a rough time, I have to say. You know, and I've heard of colleagues around my age saying, well, you know, they were told just go home and, you know, wash some dishes and, you know, do some housework. What are you doing here in graduate school? So I mean, there is a really, you know, kind of an intense history here that I feel that. I think that women are trying to now take a stand, because they're just kind of tired of being considered second-class citizens. People, particularly of my generation, and I think of some of the newer generations. The newer generation, if I may talk about this for a moment, is that they're still getting these messages that all that matters is that you look great. Right. And this is like, I mean, you know, Helen Gurley Brown wrote a lot about, you know, you could, she was the Cosmo editor, right?
Yeah.
She wrote a whole article about telling women how they had to look, you know, sexy and look sort of like call girls, and in order to succeed in business. And that was what she you know, she put out there. And I'd like, you know, women to think more about, you know, what they're doing and what they're saying and what their voice is and what they're representing and what they have to say and what they're going to do in the future. I like to hear that, and that's important.
Well, that's a good message.
And you have a daughter who is.
Yeah, who embodies what you're talking about. I wish she embodied it a little bit less, actually. I'd like to see more of her.
Yeah. Well,
But,
so you
yeah.
did a good job.
I guess, yeah. Well, somebody did. My wife probably, but yeah. So, well, that's good. So, I guess we both recognize that we've seen a lot of change in our lifetimes.
Oh yeah.
And maybe what we're going through right now is
Yeah.
is a significant step forward. And
I hope so.
yeah.
I hope so, and I really hope that someday we see more women in Congress and
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in the House, in both
Yeah.
the Senate and House of Representatives. I hope we see, I think Barack Obama did a great thing when he put in Sotomayor and I'm sorry, I can't think of her name.
Yeah. Right, but
You know
yeah,
what I'm talking
yeah.
about.
Well,
And-
and a lot of progress has been made along all of the lines
Right.
there as a result of
Right.
our generation's influence.
That's
I think,
right.
on what was
Yes,
going
and we're
on.
still,
But yeah.
we just sort of didn't have all the discussions and dialogues down yet.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have on our program. Thank you to Dr. Carilli for joining me today on Roundtable Perspective. I'm Tom Roach. See you next time.